Have a seat on your porcelain throne. It's time to talk some shit on the Powell movement.
Welcome to the Powell movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and this week I'm just home from our 17th round of chemotherapy. If you're new, know that my wife is sick with stage 4 colon cancer. It was stage 3. We treated it, but it came back as stage 4. Scary as shit. While there is no great news, there is good news. The chemo has kept the tumors from growing. We'll continue to do this chemotherapy and then move to radiation. While more rounds of chemo sucks, the drugs this time are much easier for Ange to live with. No more neuropathy, a miserable side effect where Ange couldn't drink cold liquids and the cold really affected her fingers and her toes, and she's still numb in her fingers and her toes a little bit. Her nausea is also a little bit better overall, so that's nice. The negative with the new medicine is it really affects her skin. It gets really thin and paper-like, and there's all kinds of rashes and breakouts. While it's not comfortable, it's way better than the first round we did last year. So that's my cancer update. And I need to say, thank you so much to all of you who reach out. I get a lot of messages from a lot of you reaching out to see how Ange is doing, to see if she's feeling better, to see if they can do anything. And those are all greatly appreciated. It definitely helps my spirits, and I let Ange know about them as well. So thank you so much for that. Hopefully these updates keep all of you in the loop. It is really nice to share a positive update for the first time in a long time. What's also nice is my guest this week, one of the kindest, sweetest people in skiing. And if you haven't seen Ingrid Backstrom ski, you have no idea how badass of an athlete she is. Ingrid became one of the big mountain greats in the early 2000s, and year after year she continues to push the envelope. In part 1 of her podcast, we talk about coming up at Crystal, her high school life, college, and quitting the real world to ski. There's a lot more, but I'm not going to spoil any of it for you. Before we dive deep into Ingrid, I want to ask you to tell a friend about this podcast. Why? Because podcasts are hard to find, and this one is arguably the best in snow. No one does the research that I do, and I do it because I want the guests to feel like it's the best interview they've ever done, and I want you to think that this is the best interview you've ever heard from the person I'm interviewing. I mean, this is something that I'm putting my name on, and if I'm going to be doing that, I'm going to be putting in the work. So please tell your friends about the show, please share my social posts, or even better, make your own social posts telling people how great this podcast is. And finally, please support the incredible brands that make the show happen. They are Elan Skis, Stanley, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, Outdoor Research, and Best Day Brewing. Now, it's time to chat with Ingrid Backstrom. I was told that I had to ask you about a string of bad luck for the ages when you were filming The Way I See It. Do you know what I'm talking about, and can you describe the carnage?
Oh, yeah. That was, I don't even know what year, but yeah, I don't think it was The Way I See It. I think it was a different year.
Okay, I could have the year or the movie wrong, but we'll blame Gaffney for that.
Okay, yeah, so I went to Whistler to film with Gaffney and some other athletes, mainly Rory Bushfield. And at the time, we were sponsored by Subaru, so I had this brand new Subaru Outback that I had driven up there. And I'd just gotten a pair of new Vocal Katanas that were brand new, super awesome skis, got them mounted up, was loving being up in Whistler skiing. We were waiting for a sunny day. Finally, we get a day and we go out on sleds, and I still am not a very good snowmobiler, but at the time I was just basically learning, and I had put the skis on the sled wrong, and I was trying to do some maneuver through a ditch, and I just basically went too close to the side of the ditch, and it was basically ice, and it ripped the bindings off the skis. So this was my brand new amazing pair of skis. So I didn't have skis. The guys go out film for the following day while I was getting a new pair of skis. Luckily, the rep there was amazing, got me a brand new pair of skis. I mean, yeah, super lucky to be able to have that happen. Got them mounted up, and I was going to the hill to test them out, just up at Whistler. Finally got them by 2 p.m. the next day. I pull into the parking lot to go skiing, and I skied a couple runs. Skis are great, and I leave, and I back into a cement post. And crunched the side of this brand new Subaru Outback that wasn't mine. Oh. So I had to pay for that, which was super expensive fix. So I'd already ruined a pair of skis, crunched the side panel of the car. And then finally it's Bluebird. We snowmobile way back into the backcountry. It's just me, Gaffney, and Rory Bushfield. And I went off this air and I just totally crashed on landing and started tomahawking, and my ski tip dug in and basically I went straight forward. And I was like, wow, that really felt like my Achilles tendon just rolled up. It was like searing pain. And I was like, felt like my Achilles tendon just like rolled up the back of my calf. And I got down to the bottom and Rory's like, oh, I bet you just tore a calf muscle. I've done that before. Like, you're probably totally fine. Meanwhile, I could barely, like, it was crazy. It wasn't as bad. The pain was really worse at the beginning, but anything where you have to use your calf, it was like terrible pain.
Okay.
So I'm kind of hobbling around. We have to get out of this. We're back in this basin. And so to get out of the basin on snowmobiles, we have to go up this huge hill. And like I said, terrible snowmobiler. And I make it almost up the hill, but then Rory has to come rescue me. So he doubles me up, drives my sled up, and then I come up to the sled, finally get on it, and I start going. I like rev it up to go, and it won't go. And I look over, and the guys are like pointing. They're like, parking brake, pointing at the parking brake. Because Rory had put the parking brake on. I had never used a parking brake on a sled. So I took the parking brake off. Like, I literally had revved it like 1 or 2 times. Like, it was not, I hadn't, anyways, whatever. So we start going, and all of a sudden, those guys are way ahead of me. They're pinning it. I'm like injured and going really slowly. And all of a sudden I smell smoke, and the entire snowmobile has like black smoke billowing out of it. I stop. There's flames coming out of it at this point, and I start hobbling as fast as I could, but I went the wrong way. Like, I went towards the way we came. I don't even think we had radios probably at this point. I mean, we were just not that safe in general, but the guys finally come back, and the snowmobile at this point is completely in flames, like a huge inferno. And Rory comes running past it. He's like, we got to get you to the other side. But I hobble as fast as I could past the snowmobile. And Rory just starts laughing. He's like on the ground laughing. Like, he thinks this is the funniest thing. And Scott starts laughing too. And then I'm like, yeah, Scott, you forgot that your ski boots are on that snowmobile burning up right now. And he was just like, his face just went from laughing at me to like, oh my gosh, my ski boots are on her sled, because he didn't have room for him on his sled or whatever. Anyways, yeah, the snowmobile burnt down to basically only the metal, and we towed it out of there behind Rory's sled and cleaned up as best we could. And we talked to the cat op that works in that area, and they were like, yeah, we'll get the rest. No big deal. Sorry that happened. You know, they're Canadian. They're super nice.
I've seen pictures of it. I mean, the sled was engulfed in flames. I mean, it was like a ridiculous fire where it looks like the whole thing should have blown up. And one thing I did hear about that was that it wasn't your sled. So you wrecked a car that wasn't your car. How do you go back and tell someone that your sled is in pieces and you can never use it again?
Yeah, it was such a bad scene. It was a friend of a friend who was like, yeah, I'll rent her a snowmobile for the day for $100, $200 or something. So it wasn't even like from a shop, no insurance, nothing. So I just paid the guy. He had just bought the sled, and I had to pay him straight up what he had just bought it for.
No way.
So yeah.
So you had to pay like $1,000 for a car and then $10,000 for a sled, and it was just like a trip?
Yeah, the sled was $6,000. I remember that, because that was just like, wow, that's a lot of money that I don't really have. But I wanted to make it right. You know, I wasn't going to screw this guy who's a friend of my friend, screw him over. So I was just like, okay, well, there it is. And yeah, the car, I forget how much that was, but probably $1,000 to $2,000 to have it fixed.
And then after all that, you've got to go and find out that your Achilles is torn and your season's over.
Yeah, totally. But yeah, I mean, I learned so many lessons that day beyond just like always check your parking brake on your sled. But just how Rory was laughing. And at the time I was like, how rude. And then he was like, come on, Ingo. Like, sometimes you just have to laugh, you know, and it served me well, because for all intents and purposes, like, I was fine. We were fine. Injuries heal. And yeah, that was a pretty ridiculous streak of events.
And thinking about Bushfield, I have interviewed him. I think I said in the outro of one of his interviews, like, his spirit and his personality is something that I haven't been around since maybe being around McConkey almost. Just the way that he didn't have a care in the world, but he did care about everything all at the same time. Is that just me being crazy, or do you see similarities there too?
No, I think you're spot on. Like, he has a heart of gold and just a spirit that is like, he's gonna test the limits of human, like, sport and adventure just by virtue of who he is. He can't help it. And he's also going to bring everyone along and bring everyone up along the way. He's truly just a remarkable person.
And have you spent a lot of time with Bushfield, or was it more just that one trip?
No, I spent a lot of time with Bushfield skiing. And then also, obviously, he and Sarah were dating. And I spent a lot of time with Sarah on different movie tours. We didn't get to ski together a whole bunch, but we often got to be at events together and hang out. So I got to spend a lot of time with them together, and being around them together was just, like you said, about Bushy, but times 2, plus all the bright light that Sarah was. So yeah, pretty amazing.
Yeah, some pretty amazing people to spend some time with. Now we're going to go back to a bunch of other amazing people that you spent time with, because we're going to talk about your childhood. And you grew up going to Crystal Mountain. Your folks were volunteer patrollers there. And did you spend every weekend pretty much in winter up there in the parking lot at Crystal with your family?
Yep, you got it.
You guys were living in an old RV in a parking lot. And I'm guessing it's like you, your younger brothers, your mom and dad, and you all get really super tight because you're all in that closed space together. Did you appreciate that at all back then? Or is it something that you look back now and then you realize how lucky you were?
100% the latter. At the time, my parents, so they got a 1954 GMC bookmobile that another guy on the ski patrol had converted to be a camper. So if you imagine, this thing was straight out of I don't even know. It looked like a UPS truck, but from 1954.
It's like a Beverly Hillbillies kind of vehicle, I feel like.
Yes, exactly. It was like a Beverly Hillbillies vehicle. And they got it maybe when I was probably 9 or 10. Before that, we had another old camper. And when I was 13, 14, I was absolutely mortified to be seen in that thing. Driving through our neighborhood, I was just please let nobody see us. Because it was loud and smelly and ugly, and yeah, it was super embarrassing. But looking back, of course, I'm what a cool way for my parents to give us that gift of being able to be at the mountain every weekend. My dad would get off of work every Friday. My mom, whether she was working or not, would have the thing all packed up, and we'd head up there, get there at 9 or 10 and stay there the whole weekend. And you'd ski all day and then just play in the snow behind the camper and go to bed. Yeah, it was pretty magical.
That's got to be pretty interesting. But when you get older and you're a 15-year-old, I would think that's weird having all 5 of you in the same RV. When do you actually graduate into having a place to stay at Crystal?
Yeah, that's funny. I didn't think about it from that perspective. But I think by the time I was 16 or 17, the brakes had gone out on the bookmobile, going up and down that road to Crystal. And it wasn't like you could just go out and buy brakes for a 1954 bookmobile. So at that point, my parents were able to join one of the lodges up there, where there's 10 families that belong to a lodge, and you kind of share the common areas, and then each family has their own little room to sleep in.
Nice. And even before that, you started ski racing. I think you were around 12 years old. And while most people ski race because they're looking for a sport to be a part of, it sounds like you started ski racing just to make friends and have people to ski with other than your family. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, exactly. I think by the time I was 12, my parents were either ski patrolling, or I didn't really want to ski with them. I wanted to ski with my friends, and all the cool kids were doing the race team. So that's what I wanted to do.
So you have ski racing in the winter, but then you also have basketball, track, and swimming. Were you good at any of these sports, or was it always you just had to be doing a sport?
That's a funny question. I mean, I was high to mediocre, I'd say. I wasn't always the best person on the team, but I was okay. And I don't know why I was always doing a sport. I think I just love to do stuff and just like to be part of a team. And with the skiing, I just wanted to be around my friends and doing fun stuff.
Looking through your whole life, it's I don't know if you have ADD, but you're always busy doing something. And it looks like you always have to fill your schedule like an ADD type person, or at least what I would describe an ADD type person has to do. And then knowing that in high school, you're the valedictorian of your class. And then I'm guessing between sports, your family, and school, there's probably no time for TV watching or talking on the phone. Did you do anything else, or did that stuff all take up all your time?
Oh my gosh, I'm laughing. This is like therapy, Mike. Let's see. I tried to do really well in school. I had some clubs and stuff that I was a part of. But yeah, I always kept super busy. It was mostly my own doing. I just always wanted to stay busy. I'd stay up talking to my friends on the phone. I definitely wanted to hang out with my friends all the time. That's a good question. I'll have to do some therapy to figure it out.
Was there any girly girl to you back then, or was it full on kind of tomboyish?
I was pretty tomboyish. I don't know. I think I always just like didn't think the girly girl stuff was maybe for me, you know?
Did you go to prom and stuff like that and dress up?
Yep. I was a homecoming princess one year.
Whoa.
So I was a homecoming princess. Yep. That's the funny thing is I loved clothes. I always got like fashion magazines. I've always been super into that, but I just have never felt comfortable like fully spending money or time on that, if that makes sense.
So are you like fully aware of pop culture and reading People magazine, but just knowing what's going on?
I don't go as far as People magazine, but yeah, I like to keep up with pop culture as much as, I don't know, a busy person can, I guess.
Okay. And then when you think of other people in your high school, how would they describe you? Like, who were you in high school?
I think they would say that she was always trying to study and do good in school. That was definitely part of my identity. And just trying to do sports. And I wasn't like one of the most super popular people, but I did fine. I like stayed a little bit under the radar.
You are like a homecoming queen, so you couldn't have been that unpopular by any means.
I wasn't the queen. I was like one of the princesses. There's like 3 of us. So I was one of the, yeah.
Well, I'm just going to call you the queen anyway. You might as well if you were one of the princesses. So
Okay,
you've got
thanks.
that going for you. And then were your brothers as squeaky clean as you were? Or did they get into mischief and stuff like that? And did you ever join them?
Well, the thing is I did get into some mischief. I was just maybe better at hiding it, I think.
What kind of mischief would you have gotten yourself into, being the valedictorian who loved to study?
Just normal teenage stuff.
Just drinking beers and stuff like that?
Yeah, I would sneak out. We'd go to the beach. We'd go do whatever. Nothing terrible. But yeah, just doing normal teenage stuff, I think.
Gotcha. And for some reason, I think of you being at Crystal Mountain, but you actually grew up in Burien area, like Normandy Park. So you're pretty much a Seattle kid as well.
Yeah, definitely suburbs of Seattle, and went to high school in Burien. So yeah, I would say most of my growing up was done kind of in more of that urban suburban area.
And then when it's time for college, you end up at Whitman, which is a crazy expensive private school, but you end up with, I think, a partial scholarship. I'm guessing it's academic. Was the scholarship the reason you went to that school?
Yeah, there's like a Washington Scholars Program, and I could go to any public state school for free, or I could go to most of the private ones for half off. So I got half off at Whitman, and it's funny that I chose Whitman because I could have gone to like UW for free, but I really wanted to ski at Whitman, and they had a good ski team. But you're right, they didn't give athletic scholarships. So I got a pretty good academic scholarship, and then I did some work study and a lot of other stuff. Yeah, because you're right, Whitman is super expensive.
So you joined the ski team there, and I don't think you have goals or aspirations of the U.S. ski team or anything like that. But can you describe how being a part of the race program at Whitman really changed your skiing in general?
Yeah, so before I had been skiing at Crystal 2 days a week, and then I got to Whitman, and the coach is a super passionate guy, Tom, and he just cared a lot about skiing, and he cared a lot about us as humans, and he just took really good care of us. He was also super into training and weight training. So that was the first time I did a little bit of dryland in high school, but we were really like working out and training for skiing. And that was kind of the first time I did that in a serious way. So I got a lot stronger, and I was skiing 5 days a week. And there were some really good skiers on the team. There were people that had skied like at pretty high levels that had then come back to college at like 24, 25. So there's some older kids, some really good skiers. And I think just being around all them, and it was a super encouraging, positive environment, just really helped my skiing get to a better level. And I totally gained the freshman 20. So I got a lot stronger and I got bigger. So I was just like faster on skis, I think.
And when you think about it, and I've been told you should never ask a woman about her weight or height or anything like that. But I mean, you're not the biggest girl out there. So when you think about your skiing and you gain the freshman 20, what are you, like 150 pounds your freshman year in college?
Maybe, yeah, 140, 150 probably, because I was eating a lot of dorm food and drinking beer and stuff, and lifting weights and working out. And yeah, I just got a lot stronger and bigger, and my thighs got like a lot stronger, which really helped for skiing, but not so much for the self-esteem in college.
Now it's time for my first sponsor break. And for over 75 years, Elan Skis has been building world-class skis in the Slovenian Alps. It's real skiers building skis with the highest quality materials in the world. And I'm not just saying that. Elan is not only known for skis, they also build luxury yachts, so there's no cutting corners on anything. It's all about delivering the best on-mountain experience to skiers all over the world. And while Elan has been killing it in Europe for decades, over the past 10 years, they've been building a cult following here in the States because it's hard not to love a playful ski that's rock solid underfoot and a ski that makes you a better skier. Their award-winning Ripstick line has proven time and again to do this and has a waist width for everyone, but that's not all Elan has to offer. Their brand new Playmaker series in waist widths of 101 and 91 have won all the awards, and they're the perfect tools for landing switch in the park or backcountry. So please do me and yourself a favor. The next time you demo a ski, try Elan and ski what I'm talking about. You can find out more about Elan over at elanskis.com. Next up is where I want you to buy your Elan skis from. Peter Glenn Ski and Sports have been getting people on the snow since 1958. They aren't one of the newer internet companies trying to take over the world with product lines and hotels. They do one thing, get you dialed in with the right gear for your adventure or vacation. They take pride in being the best at that. And whether you're experiencing the best-in-class retail experience or the 5-star rated website based on the almost 13,000 reviews they have, Peter Glenn has all the brands, all the products, and if you can't get the Peter Glenn experience in person, well, their website offers free shipping on orders over $49, a hassle-free return policy, and they'll price match. That's right. If you find something cheaper at a reputable dealer, contact Peter Glenn, let them know, and they'll match that price. If you like this podcast, please do that for me. To find out more about all things Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, head on over to peterglenn.com. My final sponsor this round is Stanley, a brand located right down the street from me here in Seattle, and the only brand I trust to keep my drinks hotter and colder than anyone else. Stanley is the best at this. I mean, they invented the category, and they are the all-inclusive brand that wants to outfit everyone's adventures. Stanley isn't going to sell you a $300 cooler. What they are going to do is offer you best-in-class product for a reasonable price. And these days, with ski resorts charging $30 for a burger, there's never been a better time to load up on Stanley's food storage supplies and save your family a lot of money by bringing your home-cooked goodness to the mountains, whether you like them piping hot or ice cold. Stanley delivers. And while Stanley always offers a code for the best possible discounts to Powell Movement listeners, there won't be a code for the next couple weeks as Stanley has its holiday deals live on its website, and you can save up to 60% off select items. To get the deals and find out more about all things Stanley, head on over to stanley1913.com and go shopping. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. Was racing just something that you did a lot and then you'd go free ski with the team and that was like the most fun part about it? Or were you serious about doing well as a racer?
Well, I got a lot better. So then it was like actually really fun to race and to want to be better at that. Because once I was getting better results, that became a lot more enjoyable. But also I had some really awesome people on the team. My friend Shauna Aylward, who I had grown up skiing with at Crystal. She's one of the best natural skiers that I've ever been around. A lot of people would just go into the lodge after the race or anytime they could. And she was always out free skiing. And then my brother Arnie, when I was a junior, came to Whitman as well. And he always loved to free ski, or if there was any sort of like half pipe or jump spilt, he would want to go hit those. It'd be like me, Shauna, and Arnie skiing around all day long and just traveling around with a bunch of awesome people in a van. And I was like, this is amazing. I love this. I want to do this.
So it's like every weekend you're ski bum road tripping it to a different place, but you're not full on bumming it because you're in this nice expensive college that's probably putting you up in hotels.
Totally. Exactly. We're staying in hotels, and I know a lot of people, college was like their favorite time, but college for me was really difficult and it wasn't my favorite time, but being on the ski team and being a part of that, I think really helped me stay in college and get through college. What
were the challenging parts of school for you?
Well, I had gone to a public high school in Brewing and I had done really well there. And then I showed up at a super hard private school and I took like Calc 2 at 8 a.m. my freshman year.
Okay.
And my parents weren't super strict, but I had been in a pretty controlled environment in high school. And then all of a sudden here I was at college, just like,
let's go out.
Totally. I would just stay up talking all night or like whatever And then 8 a.m. Calc 2 was really hard. I almost lost my scholarship. I was just like kind of drifting around and I didn't totally understand the dynamics of college where you need to get in with your professors and you need to go to the office hours and you need to put in all that time. And I would just wait till the last minute, try to pull an all-nighter, and that just wasn't working for me.
So school's not the easiest, but you've got skiing, which is like your passion. And how about ski culture? Do you go see any of the early MSP or TGR videos? And are there skiers that inspire you? And maybe are you putting pictures on the wall and shit like that?
I remember seeing some Freeze magazines and Powder magazines back then and just starting to pay attention to that a little bit. And so, yeah, I remember seeing some of that. I remember going to a Warren Miller movie at some point and then being in a ski shop at one point my junior year and seeing Jamie Burge jump over the train. And it was either Butter or Chapter 3. She jumped over.
Chapter 3, I think.
Yeah, the train gap. And I was just like, whoa, that's a woman doing that. And then I knew who Wendy Fisher was and started paying attention to that and was like, wow, they're doing something awesome.
So you knew a little bit about the culture and what was going on. And then I think a highlight of your college was doing a semester in New Zealand. Was summer skiing part of that decision? Like, hey, I want to go ski in the summer? Or is that just a happy accident?
That was just a happy accident. I think from a young age, I'd always been fascinated by Australia and New Zealand, but New Zealand had a better, just basically the program that they had fit better in my schedule. I could come back and still do ski team in the winter. And yeah, it was a bonus. I would get to ski when I was down there. And it was the first time I ever got to go actual like backcountry skiing where we hiked up, spent the night in a hut and then skied down. So yeah, it was super cool in terms of opening my mind to the types of adventure skiing that were possible.
Awesome. And while I'm talking about summer skiing, you've had the opportunity to ski all over the world, regardless of what time of year it is. You've done the Davenport Superstars Camp in Chile. And what are your top 3 summer ski destinations and why, if you had to put them 1, 2, 3?
Yeah, I would say Portillo, Chile is my number 1, just because the environment there is amazing. And I feel like you can always find good snow, just the way that that mountain is set up. It's just such a cool experience. Number 2, I really love Bariloche, Argentina. It's just such a cool town. It's so gorgeous. There's amazing skiing. It's a really cool cultural experience as well. And yeah, I mean, that goes for anywhere in Argentina. And then number 3 is New Zealand, probably just because I have to say the skiing's a bit more inconsistent in New Zealand. So you can get amazing skiing, but you have to go to New Zealand being like, I'm going to go to one of the coolest places on the whole planet. And if I get good skiing, it'll be a bonus.
So that's your summer ski destinations. You graduate school and I think you do a Euro trip and then you land an internship in Seattle. I think geology is kind of what you study, but you've kind of alluded to this a little bit with the Jamie Burge part, but I'm going to frame this as, is it true that the combination of Donut Fridays at your geology internship and seeing Jamie Burge in Chapter 3 inspires you to quit the real world and spend a season in Palisades?
You have done an amazing amount of research, Mike. This is incredible. I'm like, where is this stuff out there? But yeah, I was doing a geology internship. The work was super cool, but a lot of it was basically with my degree in geology, I would have been either on a drill rig or a job site managing, like monitoring the drilling. And I wasn't super passionate about either of those things. I was kind of like this jaded, probably cocky college senior. And they would have donut Fridays at the office where I worked. Somebody would order donuts for the whole office. And the people in my lab where I worked would be like, the donuts are coming, they're entering the building. And people will get so excited. And it was like the most passionate I saw people all week was about the donuts, which yes, I totally get it. I love donuts too. And I was just as psyched as they were. But also I was like, wow, do I want that to be the most exciting part of my week at this point in my life?
Yeah, at 21 years old, yeah, I could think that would be a miserable existence if that's going to be the most exciting thing. This is like 2001-ish. You moved to Tahoe and you love to ski. You realize the real world sucks. And are you there to kind of find yourself and find your place in life? Or is it more, I want to see if I can do something with skiing and this is the place to do it? What was your thought process going there?
So first of all, I have to backtrack to like not disparage those lovely, lovely people that I worked with, because basically my job at that place was to make mud pies, to do geology samples all day long. So they had much better jobs that they were very good at and they were very passionate about. So I have to contrast that and just be clear that I'm not crapping on their lives and their jobs because they had very important jobs and they were very good at them.
But you were an intern and you were supposed to do the shit work too. That's kind of what the intern does.
Exactly. Yes. Okay. Thanks for letting me clarify that. But yes, I wanted to move to Tahoe because I think like you pointed out early on, I just had this like restless independent streak where I always kind of wanted to be. And it's funny that you pointed out with always being involved in sports and stuff. And I see it now with our 7-year-old daughter. She just like always wants to do anything where she's out in the world without her parents. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's how I was. And to me, it was like moving to Tahoe. Yes, I could ski. And I'd heard it was just like this mecca for amazing skiing. And they got these huge dumps. And also I really wanted to move somewhere where I didn't know anybody just to see if I could do it and just to see what that would say about me and kind of like clean slate, like whatever mistakes I made, whatever people knew me as, it would be like a fresh start and I could just be whoever I wanted to be in this new spot.
So you're the oldest kid in your family. You went to this great school. You have everything going for you. What do your parents have to say about your decision to move to a place where you know no one just to be a ski bum?
I don't know. I mean, my parents are very amazing at just supporting me. And, they obviously ask questions. They wanted me to have a job before I went there. They just, I think, wanted for me what most parents want for their kids, just that I'm happy and have a source of income and can take care of myself. So yeah, they supported me, but they also asked all the right questions. Where are you going to work? Where are you going to stay? How are you going to make money? Yeah, they wanted me to cover my bases.
And where did you work? Where did you stay? And how did you make money?
I got a job at the resort at Squaw Creek, which is a big hotel resort at the bottom of Palisades, Tahoe, used to be Squaw Valley. And I worked in a deli cafe there. So I could ski all day and I'd show up to work at 3 p.m. Or if I was on the early schedule, I was borrowing my parents' 93 Buick Regal at the time. And I lived up a super steep hill. So if it was snowy, I'd have to walk to work because the Buick did not make it down the hill.
Right.
So I walked to work at 5 a.m. I'd get out at 11 and go ski the rest of the day.
When you're skiing at a mountain like Palisades, there are a ton of talented athletes. Like everywhere you look, people are teeing it off, it seems like, on a good day. Did every day on the mountain almost feel like a proving ground because everyone was so good?
Yeah, for sure. But I wasn't even aware of it. Like I was so naive that I just was like in my own little world, just out skiing around, trying to find people to ski with, trying to find people to meet. And then, yeah, working at the cafe.
And then I think it takes you like a season or so before you enter your first big mountain contest, and big mountain contests become your thing. But how does that first one at Kirkwood even happen for you?
I had a friend, Anya, who's a really good skier, and we would ski together a bunch. I think it was the first season I was there. It was in the spring, and she was like, we should go to this contest in Kirkwood. And we ended up going to Kirkwood, and I had no idea what I was doing. And some of the women were pretty standoffish, like looking at me in my like super old jacket that I had from high school and my super old skis. But a lot of people were really nice. In particular, Jamie Blair, he was really helpful and just kind of gave me the rundown. And then Jenna Funston, who's an amazing skier, also from Tahoe. She was super helpful. Jamie Burge was amazing. There was a lot of really helpful people who just kind of took me under their wing. And I ended up getting third in that contest. And I was like, oh yeah, this is amazing. I just got paid like $1,000. All these people are super nice. They're all like really smart, kind people, and they care as much about skiing as I do. Like, this is it.
You mentioned Jamie Burge. She was one of the inspirations that made you move out to Palisades. I mean, are the Shanes and Wendy's and everybody the who's who of Tahoe at this contest? And is it kind of mind-blowing for you seeing all these people?
Not at Kirkwood in that time. I think that Shane was probably done competing at that point. But yeah, there were a lot of people in the scene, and especially the second and third year that I was competing, you'd go to Snowbird and like Sage would be there and I'd be like, oh my gosh, these are all the people that I've seen in ski movies. Like, this is totally nuts.
You podiumed at that first contest and then you start winning contests. I mean, throughout your whole career, I don't know how many contests you've been in, but I know you've only missed the podium, I think like 2 different times, which is insane. So when you're on the podium week after week, people are going to see what you're doing and want to support your skiing. Who was the first person to really believe in you and like come up to you and be like, whoa, you're incredible. I want to give you some free product?
There was a couple people that were super awesome throughout my career. John Atencio was the first person to come up to me and be like, hey, do you have a goggle sponsor? And he sponsored me with goggles. And then not only that, but he was instrumental in just being there for me to ask advice and bounce stuff off of throughout a big part of my career. So he was super great and just like a fun guy to hang around with.
Yep.
And then also Rick Armstrong.
A legend.
Yeah, sick Rick. He was helping manage the North Face team at the time. And I didn't really have any other sponsors, but he was the one who was kind of like, hey, the North Face is looking for somebody. Are you interested? And I was like, to play it cool, like, yeah, that'd be cool. But I was like, that'd be amazing.
And you're known to be such a humble person. Were there any feelings inside like I was wondering if this was ever going to happen because I am that good? Or was there always very little ego to you and it was more like a pleasant surprise?
No, I was always just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening. Because I knew there's a lot of good skiers. And it always just felt super lucky and grateful that it was happening to me.
And when someone believes in you, like you have Johnny, you've got Rick, does that light a fire under you even more to send it even more? Like these guys now believe in me and I can only go up from here. I just have to step on the gas.
Yes, 100%. And that goes for those guys within the industry. And it also goes for a lot of the people that I was out filming with. Kind of once I started filming with Matchstick Productions, all the guys that I went out with on a regular basis, in particular, Shane McConkey and Scott Gaffney. And then later on, Eric Kjorlifson and James Heim and Mark Abma. Just such incredible skiers and also just incredible guys and friends, and encourage me without ever patronizing me or treating me like anything except for like, okay, we know this is what you can do. So like, just go do it.
Around this time, you were the only woman to be named to Powder Magazine's list of future Big Mountain heroes. Was that whole deal a surprise? And was it your first real like national exposure?
Yeah. And it's funny because I was interning at Powder Magazine around that time. And so I was like, oh, well, they're just doing it because, I was an intern. So, I was like always looking for that explanation of like, why else might this be happening? Because it's definitely probably not about my skiing.
So you think the internship had something to do with you getting into that list of Big Mountain heroes?
I don't know.
Because you're winning every contest too, it seems like. So I would think that had something to do with it as well.
Yeah, hopefully.
We're going to get into the internship in a little bit, but when you think about the Big Mountain comp that you enjoyed the most, the one that meant the most, outside of the U.S. Extremes in Crested Butte, because we're going to talk about that in a second as well, what would your second favorite contest be other than that U.S. Extremes?
That would definitely be the tram face at Palisades, Tahoe, used to be Squaw Valley. It was the only freeride world tour that I ever did. Back in the day, there was Europe and then there was North American tour. There was world tour. I honestly didn't even know. I just always went to the contest that I went to and I didn't really focus much on the ranking. I just went on where I like to ski and which contests I could get to and which contests I could afford or get a ride to or whatever. Anyways, I think that was 2010 and I had been living in Tahoe for almost 10 years and I had been skiing at Palisades for that long and I just love that mountain so much. And at that point though, I'd also been filming for 6 years. And I think before I started filming, I was so hungry and so motivated to do good in contests that I would just go for broke every contest. But then once I was filming, it was really hard to find that motivation to go hard on less than perfect conditions because I didn't want to mess up my film career because that was like everything to me. And I didn't want to lose my sponsors. I didn't want to get injured. I thought that if I got hurt, everything would go away. So just the contests, they were fun, but I couldn't find it in myself to just like go all out. So yeah, the first run, we went to inspect the tram face and the whole thing slid in an avalanche. So they ended up moving it to Silverado. And my first run, I was just thinking like, oh my God, I just was in my head. I was like, I'm the one that's filming with MSP. Everyone's going to think I'm a crappy skier if I don't do something cool, but I really don't like the conditions. I don't have anything picked out. I just was so in my head and I didn't let myself ski and enjoy it. And I did a really bad run. And then I was like, what is everyone going to think of me? So then the second run, I was just like, screw it. I'm going to do a line that I had seen Shane McConkey do. And that was in Rob Gaffney's book of NAR. And it was like this super cool air with like a pinpoint landing. It's like you're looking at like a rock wall and it looks like you're going to jump right at this rock wall. But if you perfectly line it up, there's like a perfect transition on the other side of the rock wall. It's like perfectly steep, perfectly narrow. But yeah, so anyways, I skied down the top, but it's a super big rollover. So I had to ski down super big rollover, creep over. The crowd's yelling. I stood there for forever, but I just needed to creep down and make sure I had my landing. And then, yeah, it was just like the best feeling when you nail an air like that. So yeah, that was pretty cool to be able to do that.
It's time for my second round of sponsors. And even before Outdoor Research started sponsoring this podcast, I was rocking a lot of their gear. Because nothing else I've used before holds up in the brutal weather that the Pacific Northwest delivers. Everywhere you go in the PNW, you're going to see a ton of OR gear. And that's because the locals know that while other brands may spend a lot more marketing dollars, OR keeps you drier and warmer every time. And that's what it's all about. Well, it's also about looking good. And while OR used to be all about technical mountaineering gear, and they still do that, they've changed a bit. They've hired new designers and partnered with some of the most incredible athletes in ski and snowboard, like backcountry legend Mark Abma, world champion free skier Troy Podmilsack, X Games gold medalist Zoe Atkin, and snowboarder Neil Provo, who are making sure the new fits look as good as they perform in the elements. You can check out all things OR over at outdoorresearch.com, and when you check out, enter the code SKI25, that's all caps and the number 25 with no spaces, and I'm going to save you 25% off your order. Sale items and pro products are excluded. My final sponsor, and one that's a daily driver for me, is Best Day Brewing. They are hands down the best flavors in non-alcoholic beer. That's right, life isn't all about drinking too much. It's all about having your best days ever, and to do that, you need something that won't slow you down. That's where Best Day comes into play. It has all the flavor of your alcoholic beer, but none of the alcohol. Meaning you can have a few, and then you can drive yourself, your kids. You can drive anyone anywhere because you're going to be clear-headed and ready to go. I'm not telling everyone to quit drinking alcohol altogether. Sure, a few beers can be fun, but now, when I drink alcoholic beer, I mix a few Best Days in to make sure that I'm not that guy. You know what I'm talking about. And if you're cutting out alcohol completely, congrats. Finding Best Day will make that easier than ever. And coming in at less than 75 calories, you won't be packing on the pounds like your regular IPAs do. Best Day is brewed for the doers of winter. The skiers, the snowboarders, the snowmobilers, the sled doggers, the ski bladers, the splitboarders, the racers, the snowshoers, and everyone in between. So next time you're at the store, pick up a 6-pack of Best Day. And if you can't find it at the store, you can always go to bestdaybrewing.com or find it on Amazon. Those are my sponsors. Now let's get back into the podcast. Based on what you've done in the movies, there's no reason for you to compete anymore because there's a target on your back. Everybody's got all these expectations for you being this badass skier. And if you're not feeling it that day, well, all those expectations aren't going to be met. And it's like you're not going to be doing what everybody expects you to do. So I wouldn't think there's any advantage for you to continue to compete after maybe 2004, but you did a little bit here and there. And I will say that your career is budding at this point. It's like the next biggest thing that's going to put you on the map is the happiest accident of your career. You have this huge trip planned to Chamonix with your boyfriend of that time, Kip Gar. And what happens on that trip?
Yeah, we were supposed to go to Chamonix that spring. And it was like we'd saved up money. We'd already paid for our passes over there. We had a place to stay. And we were going to get over there and like do a little whatever work to make money. And the night before our flight is supposed to leave, I couldn't find my passport, and we're like 2 a.m. packing, and I couldn't find my passport, and we ripped apart both of our houses. We basically lived next door to each other at that point, ripped apart both of our houses, couldn't find the passport, and showed up at the airport. And I was like, look, I don't have my passport. What can I do? And the guy was like, well, because there's actually war has been declared or something. It was in 2001, and some sort of political thing was happening, and because it constituted like a declaration of war, you could get your money back from your ticket, like no questions asked.
So you lucked out there.
Totally lucked out because of random political circumstances. And Kip went to Chamonix without me. And I was like, wow, I am a complete loser. Like, I'm an adult. I'm like pretty much broke. They're like, yeah, we'll have to refund your money. It was like an $800 ticket that I had saved up for. They're like, we'll refund your money, but you won't get it for 2 weeks. You'll get a check. And I was like, okay, cool. I have no money. Can't find my passport. Like, I just cannot get my shit together. Like, what's wrong with me? And I felt like just a failure as an adult, basically. Yeah.
With Kip, he's like the nicest person on the planet. Unfortunately, he's not with us anymore, but he's such a nice dude. What does he say about the situation? Is he kind of like, sorry, I'm still going. I'll write you a couple postcards?
Yeah. I mean, to him, Chamonix was it. Like, even before we started dating, it was like, that was his thing. He did it every year. Like, yeah, I mean, it would have never occurred to me to be like, stay home or to even care if he went. It was like, that was Kip's thing. And he was definitely going to Chamonix. And he felt bad. Like, he was like, oh man, I'm really sorry. I wish you were coming with me. But there was not even like any sort of, it was just like, Kip's going to Chamonix and I'm not. And like, there wasn't any feelings to be had over it because that was just all there was. You know what I mean? Am I making sense?
You are. And then how do you go from being the loser that lost her passport to going to the extremes in Crested Butte?
Well, my friend Jenna Funston, who's super awesome, was like, oh, my dad and I are going. Why don't you hop in with us? We'll give you a ride there for free. And my other friend was like, well, you can borrow $250 from me for the entry fee. So I borrowed $250 from my friend Tyler for the entry fee. Jenna and her dad took me for free. I stayed on my friend Nicole Dreon's couch in her hotel room because she was there working the event and she had like one of those crappy hotel room couches, but I got to stay on her couch. And, you know, that was like the epitome of the mentality where I was like, okay, I've got nothing. I'm going to go for broke. And I just skied the contest with a 0 F's given mindset and I won the contest. And not only did I win $6,000, which at the time I was like, oh my gosh, I don't have to work for like 6 months. Like, this is amazing. I have it made. And also, I didn't even know it, but Murray Weiss and Steve Winter from Matchstick Productions were in the audience watching the contest. And basically 6 months later, Steve Winter called me and asked if I wanted to be in a Matchstick movie.
Well, that is a pretty amazing thing, from losing your passport and not having the vacation of a lifetime to getting the invite to Matchstick. But when you go to this contest, is it the biggest contest that you've been to date? Like, does everybody who's competing in it, are they all big names in the ski world?
Well, I definitely remember being like, oh my gosh, that's Seth Morrison, inspecting the chorus right next to me. Like, oh my gosh, that's Seth Morrison. Just like being so gnarly, hopping around in the trees and just checking out the chorus. And yeah, I mean, being in Crested Butte, there was a bigger excitement. The terrain's super gnarly. I was like, I think I saw Wendy Fisher. Like, it just seemed kind of an epicenter of that culture at the time.
And then you said that being there is where Steve and Murray saw you, and that's how you got the call from Matchstick Productions. And I wanted to believe that, and I'm hearing it from you, so I should believe it. But I talked to everyone involved, except for Steve, because I don't know Steve. But I talked to Gaffney. Gaffney said that he saw you stomp a 30-foot air off the Palisades, no cameras or anything like that. You're just skiing around with friends. And he was like, holy shit, we've got to shoot with that girl. What was your take on that interaction? And could Gaffney be the reason you're in Matchstick movies? Or was it from that day of Steve and Murray?
I feel like it was kind of both. I guess that's how I always understood it, was that it was kind of both. That some of the Matchstick guys were there at the contest day. And also Gaffney had seen me skiing around Squaw. I have no idea what day it was that Gaffney saw me, because I think I was just like caught up in, like you said, that fever of being in Tahoe every day. It was just like every powder day, everyone's out there chomping at the bit. Yeah, I just got totally caught up in it. I love the energy. I love trying to push myself like that. And I just wanted to push myself and see which lines I could do. And that was like a perfect training grounds for that. And so, yeah, I think Scott saw me on one of those days when I was just like caught up in the fever, sending it.
This is at a time when Jamie Burge and Wendy, their era is kind of ending it in the movies. It's like you're almost being recruited for that token female slot in the movies. Does the thought of being a token female at that point in your life even bother you? Or were you excited to embrace that role?
It's like embarrassing to admit, but that was just how it was. And so I was psyched that that would be my spot. I remember asking Murray or somebody like, hey, is Wendy going to be filming this year? Like, do I get to ski with Wendy? And they're like, no, she had a kid. Obviously not. And I was like, oh, okay. So yeah, I think I was so focused on just doing what I could do that it seemed I mean, yeah, it's like, I guess being part of the problem with like keeping things status quo in the ski industry is I was just so focused on keeping my own spot and guarding my own thing that I just wasn't even thinking about bringing other people in, or why is there only one woman, or I just wanted to be able to hang. And so I didn't want to open my mouth or cause a stir or do anything except for ski as hard as I could.
I totally understand that. I mean, you want to earn your spot, and to do that, you don't want to be the squeaky wheel out of the gate. And that first year, you're filming on Granite Chief with Shane, and he's down below you. He gets a call from Wendy Fisher. And do you remember Shane telling Wendy that he was filming with the girl that was going to replace her? And what was your reaction to that one?
Oh, I was totally mortified. But it was just like Shane, like that's how he just was constantly looking for ways to just make things awkward or uncomfortable or get a rise out of you. And that was his sense of humor. He thought it was hilarious. And I was completely mortified. I hadn't even met Wendy. She was one of my idols. And to have him say that, I was just like totally mortified.
He becomes one of your mentors pretty early on in your career, or at least early on in your filming with Matchstick. What kind of stuff does that guy teach you? Because he seems like one of those guys who's always laugh out loud funny, always acting like an 8-year-old doing the dumbest shit. But then at the same time, he's so knowledgeable. What are you able to take away from Shane over the years?
Just watching him pick a line and then nail it was one of the craziest things. Like the guy had a total, complete knack for picking a line and then nailing it. And he didn't always pick the gnarliest line, but he picked a line that he was pretty sure he could do and then skied the crap out of it and added every little bit of flair that he could. If there's a way to air into it, if possible, hit every little thing on the way down, just add his own style and flair. Obviously he would do that. And yeah, just, I remember being at the top of one line and being like, but I think the snow is really bad down there, and kind of just whining about it at the top. And he was like, Ingrid, I've seen you ski bad snow all the time in Tahoe. Like, you know how to ski bad snow. Just ski it like you know it's going to be bad and rip the shit out of it. And I was like, oh, that's the better way to think about it, instead of expecting it to be perfect and maybe I can't ski it. He was just like, just ski it like you know how to do. So he had tons of just basic, solid advice and encouragement. And then, yeah, just really funny to hang out with, especially on down days. There was never a dull moment.
I know he gave you one of Ayla's poopy diapers once as a birthday present in front of probably 30 people. But when you think of something that's random that you really don't tell that many people, but when you think about it, it makes you laugh when you think about Shane. Is there anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, I happened to be somewhere in South America. I think I was at La Parva, and a bunch of K2 people were in Feriones or something. And there was like a big party. So a bunch of us went over, and I saw Shane at the bar and we were catching up. And he goes, oh, come here, I want you to meet somebody. And he brings me over, and there's this like Swedish mountain guide. And he introduces me to the guy, and he's like, Ingrid, you just told me you wanted to cheat on your boyfriend. So here you go. I thought I'd introduce you to this guy. And I was just like, what are you talking about? Like, I never said that. Like, he just out of nowhere just like introduced me to this guy and said, basically, like, I heard you wanted to cheat on your boyfriend. So meet this guy.
He was always doing some stupid, funny shit like that was meant to just get you embarrassed. And he was so good at that. And then on the other side of that, I mean, I think you were on the trip with Shane and JT in Alaska, where first JT blew his knee, and then a couple of days later, Shane dislocated his hip. What was the rescue like on that when Shane was really hurt?
Yeah, that was gnarly because he was on a pretty steep apron, and we had this guide, Jeremy, who was luckily a huge guy, like a really big, strong guy. I think he's a firefighter. So we had to dig basically a huge platform to kind of tow the heli in. And Jeremy just basically picked Shane up like a baby, like full cross carry, and carried him over and put him in the helicopter. And it was crazy because Shane had dislocated his hip or broken his pelvis. I can't remember which, but it was a really bad injury. He was screaming, and obviously it was really tough. But yeah, to see Shane in that much pain and then be a part of that rescue was pretty eye-opening.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, accidents and rescues in the backcountry, they happen. Was that the most challenging thing that you've been a part of in the backcountry?
Yeah, I think I'd seen people get injured, but that was probably the biggest rescue that I'd been a part of. Yeah.
And when shit goes down like that, does training and adrenaline just totally take over everybody's body?
Yes, for sure. Yeah, that's when everyone works together to just do what has to happen. Yeah.
After the fact, I mean, is there any PTSD or just do you kind of go back in your mind and replay that thing over and over, what happened and what you could have done differently in situations like that?
No, I don't think it was that overt. I think it more just seeps in over time. I think when I first started my career, everything was all about the potential and what could happen and what I could do and only about the positives. And then over time, I don't think I even really realized it, but just being a part of those rescues or seeing people get hurt or hearing about different avalanches or accidents, it just sort of like you can't remove that out of your mind, or I'm not able to. So it just kind of adds up and it lodges there in the back of your head. And then it just feels differently standing on top of a line because I'm human. And that's like how we preserve ourselves as you learn from mistakes and whatnot. And so, yeah, I think for me, it's really hard to get those out of my head. And then I'd be standing at the top of my line, like wondering why I wasn't just totally enjoying myself. And I think it took me a long time to kind of untangle the fact that it was seeing a lot of people that I know get hurt or in accidents or losing people to avalanches or whatever it was, or being in close calls, setting off avalanches, but not being in them. You know, all the things that you don't realize at the time and you just kind of brush it off. And I was like, ha, we'll laugh about that later. But yeah, it's still in your mind, whether you deal with it or not.
Well, I'm going to take it back to that first year of filming with Matchstick, that first big trip that you went on that almost kickstarted your whole career. You're in Coola. I think you guys were there for like 3 weeks or something like that and got like 5 days to ski because just the weather was terrible. But that's part of the game that you have to learn early on. But you're there with McConkey, Hugo, Gaffney. And is that first trip skiing with legends a bit intimidating?
Oh, I was so intimidated. Not only was it my first big trip with Matchstick, I'd skied with them in Tahoe. And I had actually been heli skiing before for a Warren Miller shoot, but we were on different type of terrain. And so to be there with Shane and Hugo and Gaffney and Steve Winter, it was just like, oh my gosh, what have I gotten myself into?
And that one, though, you flashed that Harrison Hotel line, and the lines from that segment in Yearbook pretty much made you the face of women's big mountain skiing overnight. Could you feel things changing for your career right away once that movie launched?
Not at all. No, I was like, I could have done so much better. I can't believe we basically were up in Coola for 3 weeks. And I think we got a day and a half, maybe 2 days max of skiing. And I was like, oh my gosh, I want to do so much more. I'm so unsatisfied with what I had done. Yeah, I think I just always wanted to keep pushing. And I felt like this was my dream and I'd achieved it, but it could all go away in a second. So I just always constantly had to, like, I couldn't rest. I couldn't enjoy that. I just had to keep moving forward and like, what's the next trip? What's the next line? Like, what can I do?
Yeah, I mean, that's your life as a pro skier. It's all about the next and one-upping and one-upping. And that's got to be challenging all in itself. But for that trip and for that segment, you won Powder Magazine's Breakout Performance. You won Women's Performance of the Year. And at this point, you're not a secret anymore. I would think this is when all the sponsors that are giving you free stuff, that's probably when that free stuff turns into money. Is that when you're able to almost stop working and start focusing on skiing?
Well, I got a couple contracts. Yep. After that, I could take the winters off, but I still worked in the summers. So like one summer, I drove a beverage cart on a golf course in Tahoe. And another summer, I worked at a restaurant waiting tables. So I still worked. But yeah, I had a couple of contracts that enabled me to take the winters off and ski full time.
Okay. Well, I'm going to talk about money at this point. So we'll go forward in your career a little bit because I want to know about your best year as a pro athlete when you're making the most. Like, what brands are paying you when you're making the most in your pro ski career?
I'm lucky I've been with a lot of the same brands for almost my whole entire career. So that would be North Face, Vocal, which is also Marker and Delbello. And then I have been on Giro for quite a while too. I think I got on Giro in 2008 or 2009.
So when you're on Vocal, does that mean you get a check from Marker and DeBello as well? Or is it just one big check from Vocal?
It's all lumped into one.
Okay. And then with these contracts, what do these sponsors expect you to do? I mean, do you have to give each brand a couple marketing days, a couple ski days, and that's about it in the analog era?
Yes, it varied from company to company. I think with the North Face, you're expected to do 30 days.
Whoa, 30 days?
Yep. And that includes, events, speaking engagements, and anything like photo shoots or marketing.
And then you're supposed to ski on top of that. So they want a 12th of your year, and then you have 11/12ths of your year to actually do your actual job.
Yes, for sure.
I mean, that's just a lot of days. I know at K2, we would take like 5 days from people. And then if it was Johnny Mosley, he'd be like, if you take a 6th day, it's 10 grand.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's Johnny Mosley, though. I mean, he can do that.
Yeah, totally. I know. He's Johnny Mosley.
So that's what you had to do. Do things change for you when it becomes more social media days? Do your contracts become, hey, we need this many posts and you need to create this much content?
Yeah, that sort of started changing gradually. Since I've had such good long relationships with most of my companies, there's always some grace there where if I'm not the best at social media, as long as I'm still skiing hard and doing stuff, I think they understand, that I'm out there doing my best with their products.
And then when you think about the dollars in the height of your career, the best year as a pro skier, can you make a couple $100,000 as a skier?
I never did. I never made a couple $100,000. I think the most I made in a year was 120.
Okay.
That was a while ago. Yeah.
So that's, still respectable, but it's just like a regular job these days, it seems like. Did you have an agent or did you handle the money part of the business?
No, I never had an agent for a couple of reasons. I guess I never really thought I was making enough money to warrant having an agent. And then I guess give a percentage to them. And then also I kind of was like, well, a career as a pro athlete definitely has a timestamp on it. And since I knew that I wasn't working in a job where I was getting that on the job experience, I was kind of like, this is another part of like the skill set that I'm going to hopefully get out of the skiing part. Like I wanted to be involved in the business side of it as much as possible.
Okay. And then I would think that the success that you had filming in 2004 and all the awards that you won, you were also in a Warren Miller movie that year. So you were all over the place. And I would think that creates a bunch of pressure for you. And when I say pressure for you, I would think that there's no blending in for you anymore. Everywhere you go, everyone is watching you ski and you can't take a run off. Is it like an odd feeling when you can see all these eyeballs on you and you know they all want to see you rip?
Sometimes, most of the time I think I'm just skiing and I'm not really thinking about it. But yeah, there's times if I'm skiing under the lift, I'm like, oh boy, I better not mess up because people are watching me.
Yeah, but I would think anybody that you ski with, even if it's just like a couple random people that you met at a movie premiere that you happen to see, if they see you, they're almost going to follow you to want to see how you ski because you're Ingrid Backstrom.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, maybe. I guess I don't even think about it. I'm just like, yay, there's people to ski with. And either they want to ski the same stuff and they can hang or they can't.
Okay. Another part of the pressure I would think that doing well in your early movie segments does is it makes you have to up the ante in size, speed, or difficulty every single year to keep your place in the mix. And while that might just be a feeling that's in your head, is that something that exists in your headspace of like, I have to keep going bigger or else I'm not going to be in the movie?
Yeah, for sure. I definitely put a lot of pressure on myself that you have to do something cool or else, you're not going to get a segment. And so my whole year for many years was very focused on getting that segment. And when I didn't feel like I did well, or I didn't feel like it went the way, which almost never did I feel like, wow, I had a great winter, nailed it, did everything I wanted to. Like I always felt lacking. That would be like my whole year. It'd be like, try. And then be bummed that I didn't do as good as I want. And then, okay, get ready, train hard. Here comes the next season. And it was just taking the joy out of skiing for me a little bit. I wasn't able to enjoy it as much as I wanted to just because I was putting so much pressure on myself.
Do you put pressure on yourself as well because you're the token woman on most of these trips? And it's like you almost have to put more pressure on yourself to perform for all women out there as well because you're the only one in the movie?
Well, yes and no. No, it almost backfired on days that I wasn't feeling really great about it, where I was feeling scared, or I had patellar tendinosis for several years from hitting flat landings or backseat landings. I was skiing with a lot of pain for a couple years. So if I was just like out trying to film, but I wasn't feeling great and I just couldn't figure out why I couldn't get it together, then it was really easy for me to be like, oh, of course, Eric Hjorlifsson's going to go ski that gnarly line. He's Eric Hjorlifsson. Of course, James Heim is going to go do that gnarly thing. He's Heimer. So it was like easy to not compare myself to them because they were dudes and I was a woman. And it made me realize that when I ski with women, it's both lifts me up and it also holds me accountable. Like I can't hide behind that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you're on an equal playing field when it's all women and you have no excuses. It's just based on how you're feeling and how you're skiing that day. And you mentioned fear earlier, just a little bit, but when you think about all the lines that you're skiing, you're all in. You can lose yourself in the moment, but at the same time, I'm sure you're more focused than ever. Where does fear fit into that mix, and when does fear fade away? Is it kind of when you're on top of the line, looking at a blind rollover that you're scared shitless, but then when you actually get in it, there's no time to think about that anymore?
Yeah, definitely my kind of ideal situation is when I pick a line that I'm like 75% sure that I can do, because I feel like a little bit of fear heightens my performance. It heightens my awareness. It definitely puts me in the moment. Yeah, it helps me perform better. But if I'm too scared, if I'm paralyzed by fear, where, your breathing gets shallow and you can tell that it almost impairs your senses, I can tell if I'm in that spot that I'm just like gonna totally blow the line, and like that's dangerous. That's a not good place to be when I'm standing in the top of the line. So I guess over time I've just kind of tried to learn where my line is, and if I am way too scared, that I'm just gonna probably have to choose a different line or whatever. But if I'm like the right amount, I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I've got this. I have my plan. Then I'll be pretty nervous. And then the second I'm like, okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, dropping. It's like, all right, here we go. Deep breath. And then it's all focus. And then you make those first few turns and it's like, yeah, this is skiing. This is what I do. I know how to do this. Just that kind of muscle memory and the flow of being in that place just takes over. And then hopefully I don't have to think anymore. I'm just doing it.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, at this point in the podcast, we've gotten through about half of your story. And this is the time in the show where I'm going to ask you to record another episode next week so we can tell your whole story. Are you down to do a part 2?
Yeah, totally. If you think people will want to listen to it.
No, I think we're going to have about 8 people that will listen. It's going to be amazing. And I'm totally kidding. We'll get a lot more than that. But people have actually asked for you on multiple occasions. So people definitely want to hear from you. And we were going to do something years back, but then I think you went on a different podcast the week before we were going to record, and it was like, I don't want to clog the system with too much Ingrid right now, and it didn't happen until now. So now we're doing the podcast, but you're not totally off the hook, because I end every one of my shows, or at least 99% of my shows, with something that I call Inappropriate Questions. And I get someone that knows you to ask 3 questions, and they can be anything. And this week, I was able to get one of your besties, another badass skier who happens to be an owner and guide at Points North, to ask the questions. I'm talking about Jessica Sobolowski-Quinn. And are you ready for question number 1 from Jessica?
Yeah.
Question number 1. When making cornflake breaded chicken, the most important part is to what the chicken?
You have to beat the chicken.
Punch the chicken over and over is what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, you can use a lot of different things. You can use a meat pounder. I usually use I don't even know, whatever you have laying around. You just beat that chicken. You want to really tenderize it.
If you don't have a tenderizer or anything, can you choke the chicken? Does that work as well?
No, you got to beat the meat. You cannot choke the chicken.
All right, beat the meat. You cannot choke the chicken. I was hoping you would say that. You did. Let's go to question number 2.
When a friend not only asked you to be a bridesmaid in her wedding, but also asked you to make an Alaska mountain-themed dessert for 300 people, what will your answer be moving forward? And I'm still confused why you couldn't make the rehearsal dinner.
So she asked you to make dessert for 300 people and you're a guest at the wedding?
Yes, I made a massive mountain cake. It was like cake on cake, 3-dimensional, huge cake that looked like a mountain. And then I also made 200 cupcakes in case the cake wasn't enough. And I was baking for like 2 days straight. I couldn't make the rehearsal dinner because I was like, do you want to have cake at your wedding or not? Because I need to work right now. So yeah, I missed that. And then I stayed up all night the night before her wedding, baking the cake. And then I was super exhausted, tired at her wedding, and got totally drunk. It was awesome.
Well, that was very nice of you to cost savings it and create the dessert for everyone at the wedding. I'm going to go with her final inappropriate question, and here we go.
Has a friend almost lit up your house with a fire, and as a result, you got a new favorite dog?
All right, so tell this story.
Yeah, so I lived in a cabin in Olympic Valley for 9 years that we rented, and it was like a super old cabin. My friend Sarah and I lived there. We had been gone in San Francisco for a Matchstick premiere, and this must have been in the fall, October. So the cabin had the heater was this huge furnace, and it was underneath the house and it was covered by a grate. So just imagine a grate on the floor and it was under the stairs. So like kind of in a tucked away spot. But if you put anything on this grate, like your ski boots or whatever, it would get melted instantly, like super hot furnace, totally sketchy. But it was like a cabin in Olympic Valley. So whatever.
Yeah, you're psyched.
Yeah, the heat hadn't come on all summer because it'd been warm. Sarah and I were gone at the Matchstick premiere. We got home super late night, so tired, and Jessica was going out of town, so she left her dog, one of my favorite dogs of all time, her Akita AJ, at our house because we were watching him, and she put the dog bed in a out-of-the-way spot over the heat register under the stairs. And I kind of thought about it, but I was like, well, the heat hasn't come on. I don't think it'll be an issue. And I went to bed and I woke up to the dog pacing back and forth, like nosing me. I lived upstairs and my door had been open and it was like thick white choking on smoke. Like the air was so thick with smoke, you could taste it. You could like chew on it. It was so bad, just coughing. The dog's pacing back and forth. He woke me up. I screamed for Sarah and she had her door shut. So she hadn't like smelled the smoke or anything. We ran out of the house and the fire department came and basically we slept on the porch that night and had all our doors and windows open for a couple days and that was it. But the house didn't burn down. The dog saved us.
All right. Well, I guess that's a close call. That didn't happen. And that's Inappropriate Questions. And that's our podcast. And a lot of times I have a nice little outro where I'll talk about your life and times and my take on them all. But really, we're going to do a part 2. So I'm not going to do any type of outro here. I'm going to thank you for your time.
Thanks so much, Mike. It's been a pleasure.
So that was part 1 with Ingrid, and it really is amazing how she became a pro skier. I mean, her parents were volunteer ski patrollers, so she was born into being a skier. But there wasn't a push to do anything more than just ski. But go figure, a race program in college is what lit a fire under one of the greatest big mountain skiers of our time. Part 2 is a much heavier episode, as Ingrid has lived through some scary times during her days at Palisades. That's the podcast for this week. At this point, I hope all of you have gotten out on snow. I'm days away as I wait for the summit at Snoqualmie to open, and I'm so excited for this escape from reality that the mountains provide. Right now, my escape from reality is reading your reviews. Actually, it's not an escape, but your reviews really help the show grow, and it makes me feel good about myself. And if you review me, and I read your review on the podcast, you're going to win some kind of prize from me, and it's going to be awesome. So if you want to know how to leave a review, I can tell you if you have an iPhone. If you have another device, well, you're going to have to look that up, but I'm sure it's not that hard. But if you do have an iPhone, here's what I want you to do. First, hit the podcast icon on your iPhone. Second, search for the Powell Movement. And even if you already subscribe, you still need to do this. Third, click my logo. Fourth, scroll down to where you see the stars. Fifth, star rate me and review the podcast. It takes about 30 seconds to do, and it's greatly appreciated by me, so thank you so much for doing that. I also want to ask you to please support the brands that make the show happen. They are Elan Skis, Outdoor Research, Stanley, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, and Best Day Brewing. Have a great week, everyone.